Hey guys, welcome back. So we'll be continuing with our session from the previous lecture, that was evolution of public administration. This is the part 2 of the video. So if you have not watched the part 1, I'll urge you to please go back and watch part 1. The link for the video will be in the description of this video. So I'll be using many terms and concepts which I have already discussed in part 1 of the video. If you have not already watched it, I'll request you to please go back and watch part 1 and then come back and watch this video. So continuing with the evolution, this session deals with Nicholas Henry's paradigms. So continuing with it, Nicholas Henry's paradigms, as you can see on the chart here, I have already dealt with in previous video. It consists of 5 paradigms: the paradigm 1, paradigm 2, and then the challenge to the upcoming paradigm, and then paradigm 3, paradigm 4, and paradigm 5. So having dealt with Golemviewski's phases of evolution and Woodrow Wilson's ideas on public administration, paradigm 1 will become very easy for us, and thereon forward we'll move ahead with all the other paradigms. So Nicholas Henry, he gave this idea in 1995, and he used Golemviewski's concepts of locus and focus. As you can see on the screen here, Nicholas Henry 1995 uses the notion of locus and focus given by Golemviewski in 1977, and he reviewed the intellectual development of public administration. So what Nicholas Henry does is he revisits the history of public administration, and he shows us how it is evolved over the periods, and he uses 5 paradigms to show that. As Golemviewski showed us with 4 phases, Nicholas Henry uses 5 paradigms. He suggested that public administration has developed as an academic field through a succession of 5 overlapping paradigms. So, first paradigm, politics administration dichotomy. The range of this is 1900 to 1926. Now remember, as I told you in a previous video, every first phase or paradigm, whether be it Golemviewski's phase 1 or Nicholas Henry's paradigm 1, every first phase of evolution will deal with politics administration dichotomy as a phase, because early thinkers emphasized on this fact that politics and administration should be separate from the very start, and that is why first phase always consists of this part, politics administration dichotomy. Golemviewski gave us 2 distinct phases. Nicholas Henry is giving us only one paradigm, just one, no analytical and concrete distinction like Golemviewski. He is giving us just one paradigm, that is simply politics administration dichotomy, and he uses Golemviewski's concepts. Remember this all over the session. He uses Golemviewski's concepts of locus and focus. So in paradigm 1, he says that locus was defined. As you can see, locus was defined. What this means is politics and administration lie in different fields, was the idea of thinkers of this era. Paradigm 1 is also known as the beginning of public administration. Basic theme was, as we have seen, politics administration dichotomy. It all started with Woodrow Wilson's essay. We saw this in the previous video. It all started with Woodrow Wilson's essay, The Study of Administration. He published this in 1887. And going ahead, in 1990, there was another guy, Goodnow, Frank J. Goodnow. He carried on this Wilsonian line of thought of public politics and administration dichotomy. He carried on this thought and made it even further concrete, where Wilson said that it is dichotomy and not divorce. Frank J. Goodnow on the same hand said that it is concretely distinct. Politics and administration are concretely distinct. He carried on further the Wilsonian line of thought. In 1990, he gave this idea. As you can see, he made a sharp conceptual distinction between politics and administration. To quote Goodnow, politics has to do with policies or expressions of the state will, whereas administration has to do with execution of those policies. ठीक है, तो politics का काम होता है policies and administration का काम होता है execution of those policies. So there is a sharp distinction in these two according to Frank J. Goodnow. Like Wilson, Goodnow also argues for promotion of public administration as an independent and separate discipline. So this is how it all started. That is why paradigm 1 deals with locus. It tells you that public administration should be a separate discipline. It should be a separate academic study. It should be separate from politics. It defined where public administration as a subject should lie. That is why paradigm 1 focused on the locus concept of public administration. So Woodrow Wilson is known as father of public administration, as you must all be knowing. Frank J. Goodenough is known as father of American public administration. 1926, there is another thinker who is Leonard D. White. He published Introduction to the Study of Public Administration. This was a book, and this was the first textbook on public administration. As you can see, it was the first textbook on public administration. This textbook of L.D. White, Introduction to the Study of Public Administration. This was also a period of public service movement. What public service movement means? The subject of public administration picked up academic legitimacy. All the universities began to offer courses in public administration. Do not confuse this with scientific management movement. That was F.W. Taylor. Scientific management movement, that we'll learn in module 2. This paradigm 1 period is known as public service movement. Public service movement means university started giving courses in public administration as a subject. So a public service movement in a sense was started where administrators began to be trained. Locus was defined very clearly in this paradigm, as we have already seen. So moving ahead, Paradigm 2. Paradigm 2 is known as Principles of Administration, and the period of this paradigm ranges from 1927 to 1937. It is the 10-year period. Now remember, Paradigm 2 was post World War I, and emphasis on this paradigm was on focus. Paradigm 1 we have already dealt with locus. वो एक era था जहाँ पे thinkers ने define किया where public administration should lie as a subject. Now we have defined the area of public administration. Now it is time to define what it should achieve, what its focus should be. So we'll see how focus is defined in paradigm 2. After World War I, public administration changed everywhere over the world. How in US nations, US gained profits from World War I, so they started urbanizing their society. Similarly, in Western Europe also, from rural agricultural society, it changed to an urban industrial nation. So there was changes happening all over the world post World War I. So this required a considerable response from public administration. A new responsibility came on public administration as a subject, because so many new things were happening and so many new responsibilities needed to be shouldered. So this required a considerable response from public administration, and that is why the thinkers of this era, ये जो 1927 to 1937 का era है, इसमें जो thinkers थे, इन्होंने ये establish किया कि what we should achieve from public administration as a subject, because so many new things are happening, the world all over is changing. So the focus got set. Locus already set हो चुका था, अभी focus set करने की बारी थी. As the population became increasingly urban, vastly expanded programs would be needed in public works, public health, public safety. तो इन सब को ध्यान में रखते हुए एक नए फोकस की ज़रूरत थी. Public administration as an activity was booming all during the 1920s, and public administration reached its zenith during this stage. ये जो paradigm 2 है, this is called as the zenith of the evolution of public administration, क्योंकि ये वो phase है जहाँ पे locus already set हो चुका है, and as a focus they have defined many clear objectives to be achieved, many clear targets to be acquired in sense of public works, public health and public safety. So this was a kind of reputational zenith during this stage. Public administration was booming all over the 1920s, लेकिन paradigm 2 जब आया, it reached its zenith. Paradigm 2 is therefore known as the golden era of public administration. Focus was given more emphasis, as we already saw. Focus was on efficiency बढ़ानी है. Focus was on administrative principles that could be applied anywhere and everywhere. So these were the focus areas. That is what is paradigm 2. I hope you have understood now. Paradigm 1 dealt with the locus, paradigm 2 dealt with the focus, and paradigm 2 is the golden era of public administration. Continuing with paradigm 2, we have a period of orthodoxy in paradigm 2. What orthodox means is being traditional or being conservative in nature, but in terms of public administration, on very similar lines, orthodoxy means sticking to rules, sticking to principles, not wanting to change. जैसा लिखा हुआ है rules में वैसा ही करेंगे. Do not want to change. That is what is period of orthodoxy. So this name is given by later thinkers like Dwight Waldo in 1960s. He called paradigm 2 as period of orthodoxy when he was looking back at the history. So paradigm 2 consists of period of orthodoxy. Period between the world wars was called period of orthodoxy by public administration theorists such as Dwight Waldo, Vincent Ostrom, Nicholas Henry एंड हावर्ड मैकर्डी. ये सब जो है ना, वाल्डो, ऑस्टॉम और ये सब जो भी हैं, ये सब न्यू पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के प्रोपोनेंट्स हैं. You will see that in new public administration session. That is the next video that I will be uploading. So in that you will learn about all these people, Waldo and Ostrom and everything. So these people, while looking back and criticizing the old public administration, they said that this was the period of orthodoxy. People just stuck to rules, people just stuck to principles. It was believed in period of orthodoxy, it was believed that true democracy and true efficiency go hand in hand, they are synonymous. तो अगर आप efficient हो, then you are proposing a true democracy. So this is what they believed. To achieve efficiency, they believed in sticking to rules, and in achieving efficiency, they believed that they are achieving true democracy. Work of government could be neatly divided into decision making and execution. Paradigm 1 में already हो चुका है कि decision making is separate, politicians का काम है, execution is separate, administration का काम है. Orthodoxy में they stuck with the same rules and they said that work of government could be neatly divided into decision making and execution. Administration was a science with discoverable principle. Again, public administration को as a science बढ़ाने की कोशिश की जा रही थी. It was also a period of orthodoxy. Main concern was linkage of study of administration with organization and control. Theorists of this period believed that organization and control were virtually synonymous. अगर organization है तो there should be control. द हाई नून ऑफ ऑर्थोडॉक्सी, जो ऑर्थोडॉक्सी का जो पीरियड है, इसका जेनिथ अगर हम बोलेंगे, अगर हाई नून बोलेंगे, तो दैट वाज मार्क्ड बाय गुलिक एंड अर्विक्स, द साइंस ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. If you have seen the first video, the very first video on meaning, scope and significance, you would realize that Gulick is the same person who gave the Podscope theory. Planning, organization, staffing, directing, Podscope, every letter stood for something. So this was the zenith of period of orthodoxy. He gave us 7 principles, 7 rules to stick by. That is why it is the high noon of orthodoxy. Gulick and Erwick's 1937 publication, which is known as the Science of Administration. Also, there were other thinkers who sprang up during this paradigm. There are many thinkers, one of them being F.W. Taylor. Now remember, all of those thinkers which will be coming in next lines, we will discuss about them in detail in module 2. So to give you a very brief introduction, F.W. Taylor is a person who proposed scientific management. He said that there should be a scientific way to manage and take decisions. There should be one best way to do everything. If you identify that one best way, then it would take less time and less effort to do the same thing. So he said that there should be scientific management. There should be a scientific way to do everything. We will learn about this more in detail in module 2 session. There was another person, Max Weber. He is a German person. He dealt with ideal type bureaucracy. He said that bureaucracy or bureaucrats should have some ideal values. We should always try to achieve these ideal values. He gave us outlook of an ideal type bureaucracy, what an ideal bureaucracy should look like, and he said that every bureaucracy all over the world should try to achieve this ideal type of bureaucracy. Another one were Gulick and Erwick, as we already saw. Podscope, they gave us Podscope. Mary Parker Follett, this is another person. She is considered as a link between different paradigms, because when others were fighting for rules and principles, Mary Parker Follett was the only person who said that okay, rules are important. Importance should also be given to participatory management. What does participatory management means? Involving everyone in your decisions, and it is the work of manager to resolve conflicts among their employees. Another person who rose during this period was Elton Mayo. Now Elton Mayo does not belong to this paradigm, remember. So Elton Mayo started his experiments of human relation movement in 1933. He belongs to a different paradigm, but his experiments started in 1933. So this also happened in paradigm 2. Now, having dealt with paradigm 1 and paradigm 2, now come we come to challenge of paradigm 3. So 1938 to 1950 is the period of challenge to paradigm 3. Now we'll learn about many thinkers who sprang up during this period, challenging the old thinkers. Old thinkers as in not so old. When we see the period 1938, they were just some 10 or 20 years ago. F.W. Taylor, Weber, everyone from paradigm 1 and paradigm 2, even Wilson, Woodrow Wilson. Chester I. Bernard is one of those people who challenged the earlier thinkers. Bernard followed Mary Parker Follett's theme. As we have seen, Mary Parker Follett did not only believe in the rules and principles, he also believed that there should be a participatory management. People should be involved in decision making. That is what she said. So Bernard followed her themes, and in a more comprehensive theory he came up with the functions of executive. Now we'll learn about this in module 2 again, but to give you a brief idea, he saw organizations as cooperative systems, and he said that the function of the executive manager का या executive का जो function होता है, that is to maintain the dynamic equilibrium between the needs of organization and needs of its employees. We have to take everything in consideration. Organization के जो goals होते हैं उनको भी consider करना पड़ता है और employees की भी needs consider करनी होती है. That is what Bernard said. In order to do this, he said that management had to aware of the interdependent nature of formal and informal organization. Before him, nobody dared to even say that you have to recognize informal organization. Bernard was the first person who said that आपकी फॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन तो होती ही है, उसके साथ एक इनफॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन भी होती है, विच द एम्प्लॉयज़ क्रिएट देमसेल्व्स, दे क्रिएट बॉन्डिंग अमंग ईच अदर, सब दोस्त बन जाते हैं. सो दैट इज़ हाउ एन इनफॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन राइजेज विद इन द फॉर्मल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एंड यू हैव टू consider that too. So this we'll all see in detail in future sessions. So Bernard emphasized the significant role of informal organizations. Another humanistic challenge, as we saw, एल्टन मेयो के हॉथरन एक्सपेरिमेंट्स जो हैं, हॉथरन एक्सपेरिमेंट्स ऑफ एल्टन मेयो started in 1933, but Elton Mayo as such resides in paradigm 3 and not paradigm 2. He put forward a humanistic challenge. He said that you cannot neglect human emotions. You have to consider human emotions because every decision anyone makes, आप कितने भी rules लगा दो, कितने भी principles लगा दो, human emotions always come into play, and no one before him except to some extent Mary Parker Follett, no one before him had took forward this idea of human emotions. So this was the humanistic challenge. Now we have a behavioral challenge. We saw what Chester Bernard put forward. We saw a humanistic challenge to previous eras. Now we will see what was the behavioral challenge to previous eras. And main proponent of this, many proponents were there, main proponent of this is Herbert Simon, and he put forward something which became ultimately into administrative behavior. This we have as a separate module. Module 3 is known as administrative behavior. So about Herbert Simon we'll learn more about in module 3. To give you a brief idea about him, perhaps the most significant landmark in public administration was Herbert Simon. He used logical positivism. I'll deal with this in module 3, do not worry about it. Logical positivism, what does it mean and everything. Bounded rationality model. There are various things, various terms which you will encounter. I'll deal with it in appropriate modules. Decision making is the true heart of administration. So this was the behavioral challenge. Now you have to understand one thing. What is behavioralism? Behavioralism is decoding the behaviors or actions or acts of managers and executives. They did not believe in considering emotions, because when we consider behavior we consider everything from emotions to whatnot, we consider everything. So they believed in the objective part and not the subjective part. Emotions and values were the subjective part of each individual. So behavioralists जो थे, Herbert Simon being one of them, they believed in the objective classification of actions and behaviors, and they studied the behaviors. And he said that decision making is one kind of behavior. Decision making is the true heart of administration. So we should define how good decisions are made. This is what behavioralists focused on. Moving ahead with challenge to paradigm 3 itself. there is a new concept of administrative responsibility. There are two thinkers, Friedrich and Feiner. What is administrative responsibility? In simple terms, who is administration responsible to? तो वो हम देखेंगे किस तरह से एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी स्टूड एज अ चैलेंज टू previous eras. During the formative periods, the most focus was on internal issues. सब internal issues पे focus करते थे, like management practices and problems, organizational behavior and structures, budgeting क्या होना चाहिए, personal issues क्या होना चाहिए, सब internal issues पे focus किया सबने. However, there was also an ongoing profound discussion over external issues, specifically administrative responsibility. To whom should the administration be responsible to? To whom should the administration be accountable to? So there was an ongoing discussion on external issues too. Basically, the issues involved is how can we ensure that government administration will act legally and responsibly. How can we ensure that it does not become a tyrant? How can we ensure that it does not become a dictator? How can we ensure that it acts legally and responsibly? So these were the questions that were being asked during challenge of paradigm 3. Now you have to remember that why is it called challenge to paradigm 3? Because everything was happening at the same time. Humanistic challenge आ गया, behavioral challenge आ गया, administrative responsibility का challenge आ गया. We will see 2 or 3 more thinkers who came up with different challenges. There were so many challenges. इसके लिए इसको एक अलग paradigm नहीं बनाया. Nicholas Henry has said that it is a challenge to paradigm 3. So these issues were hotly discussed by Friedrich and Feiner. Friedrich argued that responsibility is best assured internally. Internal responsibility होनी चाहिए भाई. Professionalism use करो, internal checks and balances use करो. That is how you ensure responsibility. That is internally. Internal responsibility होनी चाहिए administration की. That is what Friedrich argued. What Feiner argued was external responsibility होनी चाहिए. External checks and balances होनी चाहिए. Public should be the one that administration is responsible to. What this would achieve is ultimately it would not lead to corruption. अगर आप external balances नहीं लगाओगे, because external checks and balances were the only way to ensure subordination of bureaucrats. Internal power of control would lead to corruption, and external checks and balances would decrease corruption. That is what Feiner argued. Administrative responsibility challenge is also over. We'll move forward with challenge to paradigm 3. But the most serious challenge came from a few other people. Paul Appleby, we'll look about him. He gave his thesis Big Democracy in 1945. Herbert Simon, we have already talked about him. He gave in 1947 this thesis, Administrative Behavior. Robert A. Dahl, we'll look about him. In 1948 he gave this. You do not have to remember these books, okay? It is never asked in exam. If ever they ask, they will directly mention it in question, and they will say that what this author has said in this particular publication, as it was asked in 2015 UPSC. Dwight Waldo की एक book mention कर दी और उसमें बोला है कि इसने क्या बोला है बताओ. So what you have to do in such situations is you have to just remember what the basic idea of Herbert Simon was. अगर क्वेश्चन में पूछा है कि what Herbert Simon said in administrative behavior, you should know what Herbert Simon's basic ideas was. So उस बुक में भी उसने वही बोला होगा. You have to just explain what you have studied in your modules and just attach it with the name of the book mentioned in the question. So Dwight Waldo is another person whose 1948 book was Administrative State. So Paul Appleby, we saw that Paul Appleby gave some challenge. What was this Paul Appleby challenge? He compared government to business. ठीक है, जो अर्लियर थिंकर्स थे उन्होंने हमेशा पॉलिटिक्स को एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से डिफरेंट रखा. उन्होंने हमेशा प्राइवेट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन से डिफरेंट रखा. सो पॉल एप्पलबाई गेव अ चैलेंज इन द फॉर्म ऑफ ही कंपेयर्ड गवर्नमेंट टू business. He emphatically shattered public administration's self-imposed demarcation between politics and administration. He said that it was a myth that politics was separate and could somehow be taken out of administration. He said that political involvement was good and not evil because political involvement in administration acted as a check on the arbitrary exercise of bureaucratic power. So this is how Paul Appleby challenged earlier thinkers. Another thinkers are Robert A. Dahl and Dwight Waldo. So what Robert Dahl emphasized on, he is a behavioralist, and I told you about behavioralists. They examine the behaviors, the actions, the acts which are objective in nature and not the subjective parts like emotions and values. So he was one of the most significant of the early behavioralists. Remember, Herbert Simon is also a behavioralist, right? So we have learned about Herbert Simon in previous slides. A science of public administration should recognize the complexities of human behavior. It should deal with normative values. It should take into account relationship between PubAd and its social settings. So this is what Robert Ed Hull said. Dwight Waldo, remember, Dwight Waldo is a post 1950s thinker who is a big proponent of new public administration. So now Dwight Waldo, what he does is he criticizes everything that is stands for old public administration. He criticizes principles of administration. He criticizes politics administration dichotomy. So as you can see, the initial critiques of principles of administration and dichotomy received support from very influential source, Dwight Waldo. He sought to define public administration in terms of culture, giving strong impetus to comparative administration. Public administration was a subject of political science. He shattered the views of politics administration dichotomy. He said that public administration was a subset of political science, and that the long-standing art of PubAd would have to be fused with the newly emerging science of PubAd. He said that now is the time that we come up with a new public administration. Whatever has been defined in the old eras, we need to combine it with the new times, and we need to emerge with a new public administration. That is what Dwight Waldo said. Above all, he was a populist who continually concerned about the values of democracy and philosophy of public administration. He always strived for what public must benefit from. So that is, in short, Robert A. Dahl and Dwight Waldo for you. Moving on, by 1950, as we have seen, 1938 to 1950 का जो era था, that is a challenge to paradigm 3. So by 1950, two defining pillars of public administration were completely shattered. And what were those two defining pillars? The politics administration dichotomy and the principle of administration. जो orthodoxy का जो period था कि rules बनाओ, ideal type bureaucracy, scientific management and what not, जो rules and pots को बनाया गोली के नर्विक ने. So जो those principles, orthodoxy वाला जो idea था and the idea of politics administration dichotomy, these two defining pillars had been abandoned by creative intellects in this field. By 1950 this happened. This abandonment left public administration bereft of a distinct epistemological and intellectual identity. ठीक है, तो एक identity छिन गई public administration से. So this is what challenge to paradigm 3 का जो era है, ये जो 12 साल का जो period है 1938 से 1950 का, this period what it did was public administration की जो identity establish हुई थी paradigm 1 और paradigm 2 में, locus focus सब define हो गया था, it took away all of that. ठीक है, now public administration was without an identity. So this is what gives rise to paradigm 3. Now we will see paradigm 3. Paradigm 3 is public administration as a political science. अब सब कुछ छिन गया है, सारी आइडेंटिटी चली गई है. What some of these thinkers now did was they went back to political science. वुड्रो विल्सन ने बोला था कि पॉलिटिक्स एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन साथ में नहीं रह सकते. अब सब कुछ तो वापस से इट वेंट बैक टू ग्राउंड जीरो. सो सम ऑफ द पॉलिटिकल थिंकर्स दे वेंट बैक टू पॉलिटिकल साइंस. सो दिस पैराडाइम इज नोन एज पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एज अ पॉलिटिकल साइंस. एंड रिमेंबर दिस पीरियड 1950 टू 1970, 20 साल का पीरियड था. By the end of World War II, what happened? Public administration and US and other Western countries, they developed into what is called as modern bureaucracy. But the principles of administration जो scientific management movement और other movements में define हुए थे, those principles of administration were found to be increasingly inadequate. Why they were increasingly inadequate? When gauged against the size and complexity of modern state. एक modern bureaucracy बन गई है तो उसके size और complexity भी बढ़ गई है. तो अब आप सिर्फ rules और principles लगाते रहोगे तो it would not be much more efficient anymore, right? So that is how principles of administration lost their adequacy. In the post-war period, new challenges to the traditional themes of administration prevailed. We saw that in the challenge era. This is the challenge era to paradigm 3. वहाँ पे नए नए challenges खड़े हो गए to the traditional themes. Some of the scholars of PubMed now return to fold of political science, which was the mother science, जिसमें से एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को इनिशियली अलग किया था, डाइकोटोमी की थी, राइट. तो सम ऑफ द स्कॉलर्स वेंट बैक टू द मदर साइंस, दे वेंट बैक टू द पॉलिटिकल साइंस, एंड दैट इज व्हाट गिव राइज टू आवर पैराडाइम 3. However, they were not encouraged by political scientists. You cannot just break up with somebody and go back and say, okay, please forgive me, I have come back. They were not encouraged by political scientists. John Goss is one of those scholars who went back to political science. He says that a theory of PubMed means in our times a theory of politics also. He tried to defend his move के politics में हमको वापस जाना चाहिए. Administration should not be considered as a separate subject from politics. He tried to defend this in this way. A theory of PubMed means in our times a theory of politics also. Roscoe Martin was another thinker who said that dominion of political science over PubMed. ठीक है, तो politics is like an umbrella which has a dominion over PubMed. PubMed is within politics. So these were the scholars of paradigm 3 who went back to polity again. Paradigm 4. Now paradigm 4 is known as PubMed as management. In paradigm 3 we saw that some scholars went back to polity. और जो बचे हुए स्कॉलर्स थे and some other scholars, they thought that we should not go back to polity. We should move towards management, and that is why paradigm 4 is known as public administration as management or administrative science. Now remember this period 1956 to 1970. Paradigm 3 was 1950 to 1970. Paradigm 4 is 1956 to 1970. So this is overlapping. Why this is overlapping is because of challenge to paradigm 3. वहाँ पे पूरी आइडेंटिटी वगैरह सब छीन ली गई थी, तो इसलिए आधे लोग चले गए पॉलिटी की तरफ, बचे हुए लोग आ गए मैनेजमेंट की तरफ. Partly because of their second class citizenship status in number of political science department. What happened was जो पॉलिटी की तरफ गए थे उनको वहाँ पे सेकंड क्लास ट्रीटमेंट दिया जा रहा था. Why have you come back? वापस ले तो लिया लेकिन उनको उतना रिकॉग्निशन नहीं मिला. दे वर नॉट एनकरेज दैट मच. पैराडाइम 3 की स्लाइड में हमने देखा दे वर नॉट एनकरेज दैट मच. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट सेकंड क्लास सिटीजनशिप सम स्कॉलर्स इन PubMed began searching for an alternative, and what alternative they found? The management option, which is also sometimes called as administrative science or generic management. They found this as a viable alternative, the management option or the administrative science. They argued that administration is administration irrespective of its setting. आप उसको प्राइवेट में देखो या पब्लिक में देखो, it remains administration. So there is no harm in going towards management. In 1956 there was this journal which was established, and this marks the start of paradigm 4, because this was the journal where it was argued by thinkers that we should move towards management as a subject. Now this is a thinker, Catherine Hudson. She says that management is the effective utilization of human resources and material to reach the known goal, and that is what we also know public administration also does. It is the utilization of human resources and material to reach the known goal. So that is how they tried to establish a link between public administration and management. Other scholars were James G. March and Herbert Simon ने साथ में मिलकर एक बुक लिखी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, एंड रिचर्ड साइट एंड मार्च की एक बुक आई थी, देन मार्च की एक और बुक आई. You do not need to remember all these names. That is not required of you at all. Just if you are able to, only then you can remember the name of the thinkers of paradigm 4, but this is also not important. Paradigm 3 and paradigm 4 as such are not at all very important paradigms, because nothing is set in stone. यही वो paradigms हैं, paradigm 3, paradigm 4, which defines the phase 4 of your Golomb-Wieski, जहाँ पे it consisted of the most unspecified part of the quadrant. If you have not seen, I suggest you go back and watch that video, part 1 of this session, in which I have discussed phases of Golomb-Wieski. So this was paradigm 4 for you. Continuing with paradigm 4, we have organizational development. Paradigm 4 was public administration as management. So what thinkers did was they combined all the theories of public administration and management, and they came up with a new subject known as organizational development. In the early 1960s, we can see OD began its rapid rise, and as a specialty of management represented a particularly tempting alternative to political science. वहाँ पे second class treatment मिल रहा था political science में, वापस गए तो it represented a particular tempting alternative. OD as a field is grounded in social psychology. What is social psychology? Public क्या सोचती है, what public wants, that is social psychology. And it values the democratization. What is democratization? Power in the hands of people. It values the democratization of bureaucracies. Bureaucracies को ज़्यादा powerful नहीं बनाना चाहिए, whether public or private. And self actualization of individual member of organizations. Self actualization is a term which we'll again see when we'll read about Abraham Maslow, but to define in short, self actualization is reaching your highest potential. आप वो एक हाईएस्ट पोटेंशियल अपना रीच कर चुके हो. नाउ ओनली थिंग दैट यू आर कंसर्न अबाउट इज मेंटेनिंग द क्वालिटी, दैट इज सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइजेशन. Because of these values, OD was seen by many young scholars as offering a very compatible area of research within the framework of management. This is what organizational development. Now, period of paradigm 3 and paradigm 4, they can be combined and called as a period of crisis of identity. Remember this, paradigm 3 and paradigm 4 are together known as crisis of identity. This period stretched from all the way from 1948 to 1970. ठीक है, तो why was this crisis of identity? Because this was the period when it was rejection of dichotomy concept and principles of administration concept. तो सारे concepts reject हो गए थे and public administration scholars were not able to find their own ground of standing. कोई पॉलिटी की तरफ भाग रहा है, कोई मैनेजमेंट की तरफ भाग रहा है, और सारे वेल डिफाइंड concepts भी ऑलरेडी रिजेक्ट हो चुके हैं. सो दिस एरा, पैराडाइम 3 and paradigm 4, completely defines as a crisis of identity period. Scholars reacted in two ways. Some went towards political science, the mother science. Some others moved towards management or administrative science. So remember this. After 1970, when the crisis of identity ended, we have our पैराडाइम 5. जो पैराडाइम 5 हमारा करंट पैराडाइम है, जो आज भी चल रहा है, इट इज़ पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एज पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. और किसी से डिफाइन मत करो. भाड़ में गई डाइकोटोमी, भाड़ में गया पॉलिटिक्स, भाड़ में गए मैनेजमेंट, सब कुछ अलग गया. एवरीथिंग इज क्रैप. डिफाइंड पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एज पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. एज लॉन्ग एज यू विल नॉट डिफाइन पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन एज इट्स ऑन इट्स ओन, it will not have its own identity. Okay, so this is what thinkers of this period felt from 1970 to present. This paradigm is what is in session. And this all happened in 1970 when one institution was established. इतना सब क्राइसिस चल रहा है आइडेंटिटी का, कोई प्रॉपर ग्राउंड नहीं है, लोकस मिल नहीं पा रहा है किसी को. सो एक इंस्टीट्यूशन एस्टेब्लिश हुआ 1970 में, विच इज नोन एज नेशनल एसोसिएशन ऑफ स्कूल्स ऑफ पब्लिक अफेयर्स एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, और नास्पा. ठीक है, सो दिस नास्पा इंस्टीट्यूशन इज द स्टार्ट ऑफ दिस पैराडाइम. Formation of NASPA represented two things. What two things? First, जो पब्लिक एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन, पॉलिटिकल साइंस और मैनेजमेंट की तरफ गए थे, वो वापस आ गए. दैट वाज द फर्स्ट थिंग. एंड अदर थिंग इट डिनोटेड वाज सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस. व्हेन यू ट्रीट समथिंग विद इट्स ओन आइडेंटिटी, इट गेन्स सेल्फ कॉन्फिडेंस एज वेल. सो नास्पा का फॉर्मेशन रिप्रेजेंटेड टू थिंग्स. इट रिप्रेजेंटेड नॉट ओनली एन एक्ट ऑफ secession of scholars from political science or management science, but also a rise of self-confidence as well. Progress particularly in the area of organization theory and information science. ये दो fields थे जहाँ पे paradigm 5 में special progress हुई. Organization theory है, we'll learn about organization theory. It is a separate module in itself. Information science है, information science भी हम पढ़ेंगे. It is a part of MIS, management of information science, MIS, CPM and PERT techniques हैं. It is all a part of a module. We will all study this. You know, the जो 5 paradigms हमने पढ़े हैं ना, it is in short a short revision of your entire syllabus of public administration, so to say. ठीक है, module 2 का आता है, module 3 का आता है, comparative public administration भी is a part of this, and organization theory and what not. So consider this as a part of your revision of your entire syllabus. Also, module 1, module 2 and module 3 combined, these 3 modules cover the maximum part of paper 1. इन 3 modules में इतना information है ना कि UPSC, half of the paper 1 of UPSC is based on these 3 modules itself, and बाकी 3 modules छोटे छोटे हैं, बाकी सारे modules छोटे छोटे हैं, तो उनमें से कम पूछते हैं. The terms public affairs and public policy also became popular during this paradigm. ठीक है, public के बारे में सोचने लग गए. Public policy is also a different module in itself in our syllabus. Public policy, what does public policy mean in short? Public policy means policies made by government for public. So main focus was on welfare of people. Again, public affairs, policy, ये terms वापस popular हो गए. Scholars got increasingly concerned on areas of policy science, political economy, policy making, policy analysis. अब कुछ dichotomy नहीं रहा. ठीक है, political economy पे भी focus करते थे, policy science पे भी focus करते थे, policy making पे भी focus करते थे, policy analysis पे भी focus करते थे. So everything, now public administration was looked down as public administration as a subject itself. Now it was not looked on as being different or being same as polity anymore. New ideas that took place we will look in coming sessions. New public administration, which is the next video which I will be uploading. New public administration is a new idea that took place during paradigm 5. Reinventing government, there were 10 types of government which were given, that will also look upon. New public management is another new idea. It is also a part of module 1 itself. उसके ऊपर भी एक अलग session हम रखेंगे. So practice questions. Nothing is worthwhile unless and until you practice. Now these practice questions consist of both part 1 and part 2 of the evolution of public administration part of module 1. So if you have not watched part 1, I suggest you go back and watch that. Link for it will be in the description below. So these are some questions for practice. Public administration is ultimately a problem in political theory. Obviously this refers to paradigm 3 when scholars were going back again towards the field of political science. So public administration is ultimately a problem in political theory. This was a quote, the thinker by name of Wallace Sayre. So these are the questions. I suggest you pause the video and have a look at the questions. I have included UPSC questions too for your better practice. So please do practice, because until and unless you overcome that initial hesitation of writing answers, you will never overcome your weaknesses in writing answers. So if you have to overcome your weaknesses in writing answers, you have to practice, and practice is the key. So practice these questions is what I would suggest. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have liked it. Next session would be on new public administration. I will try to complete it as soon as possible and upload it. Also, if you like the way I teach, like my video and share it. Also comment on the video if you want to change any way of teaching that I take up. Also subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss on any upcoming uploads. The links for my channel and my playlist would be in the description. And thank you again for watching this. Hope to see you again in my next session. Peace out.